And so it's Tuesday, the 15th of October, 2024. Good morning and welcome to the Morning Brief on Channels Television. I am Bukola Koka.
Oh, yes, we are live for you here in Lagos, Nigeria's commercial capital. Welcome to your perfect day starter. I'm Kayode Okikulu. I'm excited to tell you that Nigeria Super Eagles are back home. Right, if you're not able to, if you're not welcome somewhere, at least you come back home where you're welcome. So it's cheery to hear that they're back home, but it's also good to see that CAF put out a statement saying that, yes, they acknowledge the situation that played out yesterday in Libya, even though the Libyan authorities have denied, any, well, let me just quote properly. The Libyan FA is saying that the logistics challenges, that's how the Libyan FA describes what Nigerian players went through yesterday, describes as logistics challenges, spending over 13 hours stuck at the airport. Well, the Libyan FA says it was not intentional and says that there was no foul play involved whatsoever. So that's how the Libyan authorities are couching this. But it was good, as I said earlier on, to see CAF also putting out a tweet on that. I think it was cheery for a lot of Nigerians to see an acknowledgement. And this is what CAF put up about 15 hours ago, saying that CAF views the disturbing and unacceptable experiences of the Nigerian national football team, the Super Eagles, at an airport in Libya in a very serious light. So all eyes now on CAF to see what decision will be made. Yes, we acknowledge that you acknowledge what our players went through, but what decision will be made? Would the Super Eagles forfeit the point? Will the match be replayed? Would the Libyan team forfeit 3 points? We wait to see what CAF would say, but it's good to hear that the matter has been referred to the CAF Disciplinary Board for investigation, and appropriate action will be taken against those who violated the CAF statutes and regulations. So,
well, it's difficult to, accept wholesale that, the logistics challenges that the Super Eagles experienced were not deliberate, because if you consider the tweet of the Super Eagles captain from yesterday about how the aircraft was hovering in the air, and it took the dexterity of the pilot, to help them land safely. I believe that was, what he put out. It's difficult. Once again, it's difficult to believe that that was not deliberate. But then again, we await the outcome of the investigation of CAF, and especially how this will be handled. Whether there'll be an opportunity for that match to be played again, or who will get the points. I believe that was part of the talking point yesterday. Yes, indeed, visuals of what we're seeing right now of Super Eagles when they were still at the Libyan airport. And, just look at that, Kayode, the discomfort that they may have experienced. They were unable to refresh, no, comfort of a bed, to lay. And this is very embarrassing, especially for our guests, our hosts, rather, at Libya. A fellow African country, and this is not the way we should treat ourselves as Africans. We are humans, and one of the high points of being African is our humanity, our respect and our love for each other. So they're back now, and according to reports yesterday, they were en route to their next destination from where they were going to be returning to their clubs. So we await a statement from the NFF about the next line of action. Those are visuals of the arrival of the Super Eagles, the national team, the Super Eagles.
I'm happy for them, really. 15 hours at the airport. At some point, it was described as a hostage situation. And for a lot of them, that was what it was. I mean, a lot of these people travel around the world. They play in different continents, home and away games, right? So they know what kind of treatment they receive when they go for away games. And by the way, the hostility for some of their, club side is even more. When you're going from one city to the other and you're going to play and there's maybe a derby, you get it. So they've seen hostilities, and they've seen how even the hosts were not hostile to them, in spite of the fact that, the match had a very high stakes attached. And you see the deputy governor of Edo State, lots of different officials actually went with them to Libya. So it wasn't just the Super Eagles, team that went through that ordeal. We had all these officials as well going through that. So wait to see what CAF will decide upon. But welcome home, Super
Super
Eagles, to
Eagles.
your nest. At least you couldn't land appropriately in Libya. You should have seen the bus that the Libyan authorities welcomed them with. Victor Boniface put out a tweet with
Of
an
the
image
bus,
of a
right?
bus saying, "What kind of Iskaba bus?" Victor Boniface has a way of approaching issues with, a comedic angle. You should have seen the bus, Bukola. It looks like the bus is, Yorubas will call it Sole. The bus from Lagos to Ibadan. It's not the buses you take from Bega. It's the buses you take from Mowe, right on the road. You stand by the road and you just flag them down. That's what it looked like. It is not good at all.
I mean, so should we just accept the explanation provided by the Libyans?
Well, CAF is the ultimate
arbiter.
Yeah, in this one.
This matter,
so
right?
Everybody is given their side of the story, but CAF, and it's an international embarrassment, international embarrassment. You see how far this news went. So a lot of people might be viewing African football as, come on, you guys, this is 2024. The game is fair play, not
well,
not
from
fair
football, of course, our eyes are also on the economy, always on the economy, and high points of the NESG summit yesterday, gives something for Nigerians to reflect on. Of course, promises are coming through from members of the administration, the vice president, and of course, one of the ministers yesterday, that the economy is on track and there is light at the end of the tunnel. And, these are lines that we've heard time and again. And we're weighing those lines with what we're seeing play out in the economy. Investment, the GDP, revenue, and of course, the impact on the vulnerable. But what is more important is also the comments of the Vice President of the World Bank yesterday at that summit, when he said that the reforms from 2003 to 2007 were just right for Nigeria, and they kept Nigeria on track, but they were not sustained, and that the monetary and fiscal policies of this administration are hurting the vulnerable. Sometimes we wonder whether the international institutions can make up their minds about what exactly they want for Nigeria and from Nigeria. On the one hand, they say remove subsidy, and the removal of subsidy is one economic policy that has been hurting the poor in no small measure, particularly under this administration. So the double speak leaves one wondering what exactly the international institutions require of the country. And so Nigeria must reflect on the friends that she keeps and the ideal economic policies that will work for the country, and of course produce that light at the end of the tunnel the Nigerians have been waiting for a very long time.
It's very funny you say light at the end of a tunnel, Bukola, because that's where we're starting off on the show this morning. So let's sort of unpack, now that Bukola mentions light at the end of the tunnel. Let's tell you that Nigerians were once again plunged into nationwide blackout following the collapse of, its national grid for the sixth time this year. What's the enduring solution or solutions to this constant power grid collapses? We'll explore the possibilities with the experts today. So the light on the end of a tunnel is what we're also in search of this morning.
I like that comparison. Away from that, we're also going to be looking at something pleasant on the other hand. How far can your patriotism go for Nigeria, particularly amid price of petrol pegged at 1,200 naira plus per litre? Only so far, right? I get that answer. Well, we'll have some expectations. We'll have some exceptions to this general view on this poser. After 25 years abroad, orthopedic surgeon Dr. Julius Oni has returned to Nigeria, and his goal is to ensure that Nigerians no longer need to travel abroad to access high-quality orthopedic surgery and treatment. Let's find out if there are other motivations for his return as we engage him today.
Oh, yes. That's something I know a lot of people will be looking forward to. There's been a lot of talk about Japa, right? But there's also the conversation around Jakbada. So stay tuned definitely for that one. And the labor force in Nigeria was estimated to reach over 75.5 million people in 2023, an increase of 2.2 million in 2022. And this accounts for a little over a quarter of a country's population. But just how many are active within this working age group? And how much investment are states deploying to human capital development? Well, join us for that one yet again on the show.
And so you know that nothing escapes us on the Morning Brief on Channels Television, particularly if they have to do with your well-being. So all of the big stories are in our line of focus on the Morning Brief today. We'll be reviewing all of them. But after this time out, we'll be starting with the top stories. Don't forget, however, that you are the third anchor on the show, so you can start sending in your comments, your reactions to the big stories on the Morning Brief, and we'll be ready to take them. Of course, you can also send your videos and your contributions. We'll, of course, bring you a hand of fellowship. That's our WhatsApp handle later on the show. But hashtag CTV Morning Brief is your go-to for you to send in your comments this morning. We'll be back after this break with the top stories. Join us again. Welcome back to the Morning Brief. And top on the brief this morning, for the record sixth time in 2024, Nigerians were once again plunged into a nationwide blackout following the collapse of the national grid. And the grid reportedly collapsed at about 6:18 p.m. on Monday evening, leaving Nigerians in darkness. It began with power generation dropping from 3.87 gigawatts at 5 p.m. to 3.56 gigawatts at 6 p.m. and then 0.00 gigawatts at 7 p.m. and 8 p.m. The Enugu Electricity Distribution Company, according to reports, has confirmed the grid collapse in a statement on Monday evening. And away from that, the chairman of the Presidential Task Force on Fiscal Policy and Tax Reform, Mr. Taiwo Oyedele, has been speaking on the Nigeria tax bill. Speaking on the sidelines of the Nigeria Economic Summit, Mr. Oyedele explains that part of the bill entails increasing the taxes of persons who earn above 1.5 million naira.
If you earn 1.5 million naira a month or less, your personal income tax bill will go down. Of course, at the lower end, completely exempted. But if you earn more than that amount, you see it going up incrementally up to 25%. Today, if you earn 100 million naira a month, nobody hits 19% effective personal income tax rate. We're taking that up to 25% for the rich people. And that's because you need to balance the book. Why is that important? We also have the one around VAT. We look at food, we look at health, we look at education, we look at accommodation and transportation.
And the Minister for Arts, Culture and Creative Economy, Nat'l Musawa, is looking at the possibility of contributing about $100 billion to increase the gross domestic product by 2030. This, according to her, can be achieved through collaboration with the Ministry of Trade, Industry and Investment. She stated this at a stakeholder engagement on the National Intellectual Property Policy and Strategy.
In my ministry, we have committed that we want to have a great expansion economically, whereby we will contribute at least $100 billion to increase the GDP by 2030. And the first step in giving us the ability to do that is to have IP.
And climate change experts are calling for increased funding for subnational governments in Africa to achieve the 2030 target by the Paris Agreement to reduce emissions by about 45%. Vice President Kashim Shettima, who was represented at the Africa Climate Change Forum in Abuja, restates government's commitment to providing the needed legal and financial framework for climate change resilience.
As rightly said by my friend from the World Bank, some of the policy decisions, the policy options available are painful, but they were almost inevitable. My heart and the heart of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu goes to the Nigerian people We empathize with what the poor and the young are going through in the Nigerian nation. But we had no option, as he rightly said. Yes, some of these decisions are unpopular, but the truth that sets men free, as H.S. Aga said, is most often the truth that men prepare not to hear. But what he said were very poignant and were very, very truthful. We have thus prioritized investments in critical infrastructure, enhance our social safety nets, and promote innovation across all sectors. I am pleased to report that we are making significant strides in addressing several key issues, including regulatory bottlenecks and ease of doing business challenges. This progress should instill confidence in our collective ability to overcome those challenges. Our objective is to ensure that the Nigerian economy is inclusive, where small and medium-sized enterprises can thrive alongside large corporations, and where every citizen, regardless of location or background, can benefit from economic opportunities. We have initiated various programs such as the MSME hubs and single-digit loans for manufacturers designed to provide entrepreneurs with the support they need to succeed. We have also introduced the Credit Corporation to offer our workers consumer loans with single-digit interest. These initiatives collectively will boost the economy and ensure it remains competitive in Africa and globally.
Well, Vice President there in his earlier comments on the administration's ongoing economic reforms. And to other stories now, the Federal Ministry of Education has announced that the new curriculum for basic education will commence across schools in the country by January 2025. The Minister of Education, Professor Tahir Maman, who disclosed this in Abuja at a stakeholder meeting on the implementation of the new curriculum, says senior secondary education curriculum would also commence by September 2025. Professor Maman says the new curriculum will address problems of learning, crisis, and employability, as the new skill acquisition to be introduced will have a multiplier effect by equipping students with 21st century skills. And to a sad one, 6 persons, all adult male, have been confirmed dead in a multiple road accident involving 5 vehicles at Amuloko area of Onwara, local government area of Oyo State. A statement by the Sector Public Education Officer, Oyo State Road Safety Command, Mr. Mayowa Idewo, says 6 adult male lost their lives, while 5 other adult male sustained varying degrees of injury. The accident, which occurred at about 8 a.m. at Okieleshin Amuloko in Onwara, local government area, involved 5 vehicles comprising 2 articulated vehicles, a minibus, and 2 tricycles, which were significantly damaged due to the impact. Eyewitness accounts say one of the trucks carrying tiles lost control due to possible brake failure and rammed into another truck carrying drinks, while the tricycles and the minibus all got caught up in the chaos that ensued. The 5 adult male who sustained injuries have been taken to a neighboring hospital for treatment, while bodies of those who died have been deposited at the morgue of the University College Hospital, Ibadan. And moving further down south, in Delta State to be precise, the divisional police officer of Agbaro Police Division has been killed after hoodlums ambushed officers during an operation. The State Police Public Relations Officer, Bright Daffy, confirmed to Channels Television that the incident occurred in the early hours of Monday. According to him, 2 divisional police officers from Agbaro and Orerokwe stations were on an operation with some officers when they were ambushed and shot at by hoodlums. Sadly, the DPO of Agbaro lost his life, while the other officer sustained injuries and was rushed to the hospital, where he has been treated and is now reportedly in stable condition. The police have given assurances that the hoodlums will be brought to book. And to politics now, the National Working Committee of the People's Democratic Party, led by Umar Damagum, is threatening to unleash the police on suspended officers of the party for contempt of court. The acting National Publicity Secretary of the PDP, Mr. Ibrahim Manga, stated this at a news conference in Abuja, where he also alleged that some prominent members of the party are fueling the ongoing rift that has split the PDP into two factions. And the Vice President of the World Bank, Mr. Dermot Gill, says Nigeria has the largest number of people living in extreme poverty globally. Speaking at the Nigeria Economic Summit 30th anniversary in Abuja, Mr. Gill notes that Nigeria's reforms between 2003 and 2007 led to impressive economic growth.
To start that process of thriving, the President's signature reforms are essential. They are essential to break from the past and to chart a more hopeful course for all Nigerians. These include the unification of what used to be multiple exchange rates. They include allowing that unified exchange rate to be determined by the market. And of course, they include the elimination of fuel subsidies. But implementing such a far-reaching reform is impossible without solid political commitment from the top. The price of PMS has quintupled since the subsidy cuts, imposing terrible hardship across the breadth of Nigerian society. The central bank has had to hike its policy rate by a huge 850 basis points, that's almost 9 percentage points, in the last 9 months to boost confidence in the Naira and anchor inflationary expectations. But the central bank financing of fiscal deficits has finally ended. And Governor Cardoso has been putting Nigeria, or be helping to put Nigeria on the right course, on the correct course. But this is only the beginning. Nigeria will need to stay the course for at least another 10 to 15 years to transform its economy.
And outside our shores, U.S. Vice President and Democratic presidential nominee Kamala Harris has agreed to appear on Fox News this week, her first ever sit-down interview with the conservative news network. Before then, Harris and her presidential opponent, Donald Trump, will campaign in Pennsylvania, hosting events on opposite sides of the battleground state. Her running mate, Tim Walz, has twice appeared on Fox News Sunday during the campaign, with the Democratic ticket ramping up media appearances following criticism on the matter. As Election Day nears, Trump has said any unrest that may unfold on or after November the 5th will likely come from radical left lunatics. That's according to reports by the international media. And in sports news, the Confederation of African Football has expressed deep concern over the troubling ordeal faced by Nigeria's national football team, the Super Eagles, at a Libyan airport. This comes after the Super Eagles and Nigerian delegation to the Africa Cup of Nations qualifiers were left stranded under distressing conditions for several hours. CAF said the issue has been referred to its disciplinary board for investigation, and appropriate action will be taken in line with its statutes and regulations. Meanwhile, the Super Eagles have returned to Nigeria after their airport ordeal in Libya. The Nigeria national team's flight landed at the Malam Aminu Kano International Airport in Kano on Monday evening. The players then moved to Abuja, from where they are expected to depart to their various clubs. The Super Eagles were held at the Al-Abak airport. And President Bola Tinubu has welcomed the safe return of the Super Eagles to Nigeria after the treatment they endured in Libya, and demanded swift justice for the Super Eagles in line with football statutes and regulations. And of course, I can only imagine, and I'm quite excited about what you are saying about some of these big stories. So Kylie joins me now for a review of those stories. Hello again, Kylie.
We're starting off with the building collapse in the Ordeal area of Lagos State. Yesterday was quite shocking, particularly because the moment the building collapsed was caught on camera. So I'd like you to take a view and a listen to that moment, and we'll show you what Nigerians and the authorities have been saying. So this happened yesterday, right here in Lagos. All right, so we'll get to show you that, but I think it's important to first get what Nigerians are saying about
and you know, I saw that video yesterday, and it was quite surreal. You know, the fact that somebody was even able to catch it on camera, you know, says quite a lot. Maybe they had seen signs or something that it was, about to fall apart from afar.
Yeah.
And, they quickly put up their camera. But it was a very profound moment. And you could see, people trying to run away from that area. But we should get reports about whether there were any casualties, because you could see people. Yeah, that's the video there.
You can just keep that video on loop and just imagine the thoughts going through the minds of people around. But I know the obvious questions for a lot of people is, one, were there people in that building when it collapsed? And by extension, any casualty recorded? Well, Lasema says that there was no casualty whatsoever as a result of this.
Were there any people just around the building, the surrounding area of the building? That vehicle seems to remain intact even after the collapse, but was there any other, any other structure or vehicle closer to the area of the building just before it collapsed?
Very important questions, and it's important to also do all these checks and ensure that we have all these areas covered. Lasema, as I said there was no casualty whatsoever. I even went as far as saying that it got information from LASCA. That's the agency that is in charge of building control labs. LASCA is the Lagos State Building Control Agency.
Yeah.
So Lasema said that LASCA had said they gave, the occupants of the building, they had notified them rather that this is a distressed building. But you wonder what was then done. Did you cordon off the area? Did you anticipate that was going to happen?
Was the building sealed?
Exactly, because people were moving past. I imagine maybe people were even inside of it, and when it showed signs of distress, they moved out. But it's cheery to hear there were no casualties. But what are you saying?
But this is one too many. And how many other buildings in Lagos are distressed like this, or in any other part of the country? Because we really do not want to have to review such stories again.
Absolutely.
Even if there will be no casualty.
Indeed. Michael Jasford is the first user who says, oh my goodness. And, same question a lot of Nigerians have asked. I just hope there's no single life in that building at the very time of this incident. Well, as I said earlier on, Lasema said that there was no casualty in that one. Now, you see, this user talks about the high cost of rent, or at least why people end up in these buildings because of rent, and is asking that, please, if you can't see a cheaper story building, never desperately go for these kinds of buildings. I believe there are other buildings like bungalows that are even more safer than this degrading story buildings. And you find quite a number of them, and it's been said time and again that action needs to be taken to ensure we don't have bigger disasters on our hands.
And Don is the next writer this morning, and he says, or they say, total disaster. It's really an old building, evidently, from the whitewashed color of the paint of the building. And he continues by saying, government should start doing something about buildings like this. There are many of them like this in Enugu State. So is there an appropriate agency like the LASCA in Enugu State? Please go after such buildings, if indeed there are. Maybe you should start your investigation now, such that those buildings can be sealed. This is a feedback from one of our users. So Enugu State government, please take note.
Thank you very much. So if you're in any other part of the country and you see these buildings, if you see something, say something. It's not just for crime, right? It's also for infrastructure. So reach out. If you're in that building or you know a building like that, reach out to the authorities and alert them. Edgy Dot also re-echoes that concern about whether or not people were affected. Again, Lasema says there were no casualties. But let's talk about power now, Bukola.
Yes, so Nigerians are talking about the most recent blackout. Will this be the last, Kari? It's October 2024, and Nigerians have witnessed the 6th blackout this year, already the 6th. And so what are you saying about this? In Nigeria, everything is on the rise except the national grid, which is always collapsing. We wish the price of petrol will collapse like the grid collapses. Well, that would be more pleasant.
Really pleasant.
Collapsing 6 times. Price of petrol, that would be monumental, right?
That'll be back to what it was before subsidy removal.
Right.
Mr. Foshere is next, saying Do you want to know the funniest part? Only about 13% of Nigerian population is connected to the national grid. Well, I'm not sure where you got that from, because as at 2020, it was even more than 50%, right? So even of late, you see some figures quoting 75% of people stay in households that are connected to the national grid. So 13%, hey, you need to check your facts right.
Please check and check again.
Goes on to say we can't even provide stable electricity for Nigerians. Imagine how long we have to go to provide electricity for just half of the population. As I said earlier on, even data from 2020 shows more than 50%, and some say as much as 75. Other data will even tell you 80 plus. So 13%, and I think you can even tell, really. So maybe you need to check that again.
All right.
Owoshere, that is.
So Fesso Oyebade is the next user, and they say no wonder there has been a power outage in our glorified Band A neighborhood. Of course, you can add one or two things together to explain away the reason for the low supply of power.
This user, Aim Courage, well, I don't know if it's sarcasm, says, so you mean I should go and fuel my generator? Is the grid that fragile? Why doesn't it affect neighboring countries that you supply light? Well, I don't know if you've asked someone in the neighboring country. That's from Aim Courage, by the way. I don't know if you've asked and they've told you, but I know that a lot of them are owing, right? And recently the authority had to come out with a bill.
For even Benin Republic recently,
yeah, they're owing.
That they haven't paid, and it's derailing our own economy in some sort because of the huge bill.
So there you go. We'll keep your comments coming in. Hashtag CTV Morning Brief about any of these issues. But there's one more talking point, Bukola.
And, that affects moms. Like
Just
me.
moms? It affects everybody, Bukola.
Okay, dads too. I got you there.
It affects all of us. Moms, dads, children. Non-moms, non-dads, non-children.
Because dads sometimes pay the bill for the gas. So what are you saying about this? Well, what are you saying about this? Mr. Bator says, my grandparents used firewood and they lived long. So what am I waiting for? Well,
so a little backstory.
That also has an impact on your environment. So don't be in a hurry to jump on the bandwagon. Well, of very few people using firewood right now, because that has an impact on the environment. It's not good for respiratory health. It's not good for public health. So, but what are the alternatives? That's the question.
Fantastic question. So the backstory is the price of gas, cooking gas, has jumped to 1,500 naira per kg. So that's a lot. If you do the math, if you want to fill a 13 kg cooking gas, you do 13 plus 6.5, that's almost 20,000 naira, right? When people used to pay about...
I recall buying gas, the 12.5 kg for 5,000 naira.
For 5,000 naira, right?
A couple of years down the line.
Just think about it. Even of late, people were buying it for just over 10,000 naira or so. So just do the math. So that's why a lot of people are saying, well, we need to find alternatives. And I saw a very interesting tweet yesterday, Kola. So he says and you actually read it out to me that when the price of tomatoes went up, people moved to carrots and cucumber. When the price of petrol went up, people moved to CNG. So the person asked, now that the price of egg is going up, what do people move to? And I saw someone put up a picture of noodles with garden egg on top of it. That cracked me up on the one hand, but it just showed the reality of the situation. It is not funny for a lot of people right now. So with the price of gas going up, naturally people will move to charcoal, firewood. They don't want to hear anything environment. What is most important for them is survival. And they'll tell you that, hey, the bigger economies are the ones responsible for global warming. The pollution they churn out is that times 1 million, just a little firewood, or even what Nigeria is responsible for. So for now, these people just want to survive. And if it is firewood, all well and good for them, except the people who are complaining have an alternative for them.
And speaking of alternatives, Nigerians are also resorting to what they call, the Legady's Benz now, because many people cannot afford petrol anymore, and they're parking their vehicles and walking.
So
but how much distance can we all walk?
Absolutely. So it's curious then for them here in the World Bank saying we have to stay the course for 10, 15 years. And they're thinking, do you mean the same course that we're on? Does it even get better at any time soon? Well, Annie is next, saying we always knew that this one would rise. That's the price of gas. The last price was 1,350. gas one day compete with fuel. I know it's small race to 2K. Well, there's the dollar to naira as well, which is also on racing to
1,600 naira. Well, Annie is the next writer, and Annie says, Lamau, we always knew that...
Oh, I took that one already, so you're going to help.
So Health Prefect is the next user who says, I guess it's time we revert to firewood. After all, food that they cook with firewood is sweeter than the one they cook with gas. So can you blame anyone for whatever choice that they resort to this morning?
Absolutely not.
Okay, so we'll take a break now. When we return, we'll begin our first conversation, which is on the constant grid collapses. What are the reasons and what's the way out? Important questions to ask, and we'll be right back. Stay with us.
Well, we're talking energy this morning. At the heart of the challenges faced by Nigerians today is energy, really. You can talk about the price of petrol, cooking gas, even the grid collapse right now. It's all energy related. So this morning we're starting off with the electricity bit. Yes, we'll talk petrol as well. We'll talk gas. It's a lot in the mix. And we're joined by none other by Professor Yemi Oke, who is a professor of energy and electricity law. He is one of the leading experts and scholar in oil and gas, energy and electricity law in Africa, also a senior advocate of Nigeria. Professor Oke, you're welcome to the Morning Brief.
You too, guys.
You know, I was just looking at your profile and the work you've done, and I don't envy you at all, Prof, because you're smack in the middle, as I said earlier on, of a lot of challenges Nigerians are facing right now. Electricity, gas, oil and gas, petrol. So you are the man who's just smack in the middle of it. And who better to speak to today about this than you? So, Prof, I'm really spoiled for choice where to start from, because all of these issues are facing Nigerians, but we'll try our best to capture everything. So let's start from the latest, electricity. The grid collapse. This has happened one too many times. And we expect that at this point, we'll have gotten to a situation where we're able to say, at least we have resolved electricity. Let's face other things. But we saw distribution companies putting out statements saying the grid collapsed just moments before 7 p.m., said they didn't get anything, the TCN, even the GENCOs as well. So maybe you can help us understand what this grid collapse means this time around. Well, we understand some of them have restored power. But when you hear grid collapse, what does it mean?
Thank you very much for your important question. I'll try to simplify it as much as possible in a layman's language, meaning the electricity at the level of the transmission got shut down. It couldn't flow out. So the distribution companies couldn't receive electricity or megawatts from the transmission company. Basically, that's that.
Interesting.
But let's go into a bit of data. Of course, as you rightly said, it's been, I mean, what is this? I mean, what is that? And there's been intervention here. Come and explain this. I understand the challenge. As I'm talking to you, there's no electricity in University of Lagos. That's bad. So we are all in it together as a people. But I hope we'll get out of it soon. This is the 6th grid collapse in 2024. As bad as it seems, I think there's been a sharp drop in the frequency of grid collapses from the current administration. I'm stating facts now. I used to predict an average of 15 to 16 grid collapses per year. So in the last 1.5 years or thereabout, we've seen a downward trend in grid collapses. So we've had 6. In October, previous Octobers will have had like
10 or 8 or 11. So in terms of the mathematics, in terms of the statistics, the frequency is actually on the decline. Must we have grid collapses, or must our national grid collapse? The answer is capital no, it shouldn't be. In this time and age, when you have sound technologies that could be deployed for intelligent surveillance of the transmission infrastructure, you will have received early warning signals that certain feeders, certain areas were not aligning, and you will have deployed your engineering people to do the needful. So, grid will collapse due to several reasons. If it's hydro-based and there is a drop or low water level, then it might collapse. If it's gas-fired and there is sharp drop in gas supply, grid might collapse. Because you couldn't store megawatts, if megawatt that's supposed to be wheeled out is rejected for load rejection, the grid might collapse because you can't bring it back. Vandalism, just as you have in the petroleum pipelines, will make grid to collapse. Of course, there are a lot of security issues around that transmission infrastructure. Kidnappers are now targeting the bandits are now targeting those as suspects to attack those infrastructure, but that's not for the segment today. Improper maintenance over time would necessarily lead to the collapse of your grid. We got it slightly wrong as a country because the world is actually going off grid. The world, the global trend is such that countries are going off grid. And I've said, and I'm still saying, it's almost like a Stone Age thing to talk of a federated grid in the 21st century. And after 15 years of our advocacies, we have a decentralized structure. That states can now have their own grid, regions may have their own grid. So we should have a decentralized grid.
All right.
But the world is going off grid.
All right, Professor. Okay, so this suggests to me that there is somebody in charge of maintenance, there's somebody in charge of surveillance, there's somebody in charge of, ensuring a gas supply. But we'll get to who should have done what later on. I'd like you to look at the figure of the budgetary allocation to the power sector in 2024. And, 344 billion naira was allocated to the power sector. That's an increase of 43.9% when compared to 239 billion naira that was allocated to the sector last year. And only 4.59 billion is for personnel cost. So what that says is that, the remaining about 90% should be for maintenance, and all the other options or alternatives to the power grid sustenance. So is what we're seeing, does it justify the funds that have been allocated to the sector, in your view?
I don't want to go into budgeting. That's another issue, because even a colleague of mine was talking about budgeting yesterday for some department to have training in this. So I don't want to go into budgeting. I'm not in charge of budgeting, and I'm not a budget expert. Let me limit myself to this. For me, if you ask me objective, I will answer that even the money we are budgeting for power, though it's not sufficient, looking at the dollar's rate. But over time, as a nation, we've been spending much more in a supposedly privatized sector. One, the generation is no longer in the hands of the federal government. The distribution is no longer in the hands of the federal government. The transmission is still in the hands of the federal government, technically. But recently, with the Electricity Act, we're trying to dig that. Under the old structure, TCN, Transmission Company of Nigeria, was performing 2-3 roles as transmission service provider and as system operator. Under the Electricity Act 2023, we try to explicate that now there will be independent system operator to be taken off the TCN model. We're getting there. With all this extensive privatization that have happened in the power sector, we've had privatization and private players are the ones in charge. What are we now budgeting for? On the one hand, the money is not enough. But what are we actually budgeting for? So I'm not going to answer that.
But can you answer whether or not these funds are at least enough to maintain infrastructure, even if it's not enough for transition to other forms of power?
The money is certainly not enough. If you want to ask me objectively, the money is not enough.
For maintenance?
Because we had some of those infrastructures were laid in 1861, years back. And in the early 60s and 70s, they were merely expanded. It's like talking of the fact that you have burst pipelines that were installed several years ago. You are putting petroleum products in it, and because they are so weak and dilapidated, of course, they burst. The same thing. So once you put load into those dilapidated old structures, it's going to burst. So if you have to overhaul, we're going to spend a lot of money. But the good thing is that we are privatized. So we now need to provide sound enabling environment and knowledge-based sector governance and regulation so that we will crystallize the power sector in a kind of positive trend. The money is certainly not enough because power sector is capital intensive. And Nigeria is a huge country, and some of this infrastructure, they are in rural, in the forest. I'm sure you've seen transmission lines in rural areas, deep inside forests. So how do you mobilize to go in there? We even talk of security issues, which I don't want to amplify now because it's a worrisome trend now. How do you go and maintain transmission cables, lines in volatile areas? Who will go in there? And these are not things you can do remotely. You've got to go in there and fix it. Sometimes you have shrubs obstructing the passage. It's like you bridge two hard wires, it's going to snap your electricity.
Right.
So you have shrubs, trees overgrowing, it's going to bridge those transmission cables and they're going to spark. We have so many issues. So talking about the budget can never be sufficient because at what cost? Dollar to naira exchange rate. So that is not even the essence of what we are looking at. But the insufficient amount of money that we have as a country, we need to manage it well. And if you look at the increase, it's done well. We've seen about 35% or more increase in budgeting or an allocation for the power sector, which is okay.
All right,
I'm
Prof.
okay with that. But the minister is not the one in charge of those cables. He's not in charge of TCN. They put human beings there, and they need to do the job.
Prof,
and security.
Naturally, people will say that the buck stops at the Minister of Power's table. Right, that's why he's a minister of power. Then he's able to marshal his people, other stakeholders, that say this is what needs to be done because we owe it to the people of Nigeria to give them the very best. You've tried to give some.
Let me disagree with you on that. Let me disagree with you on that. Let me disagree with you on that. I say I'm an advocate of responsible followership. It takes bad followership to have bad leadership, and bad leadership to have bad followership. let me give you a typical example. As bad as petroleum pump price is now, I'm buying it, you are buying it, 1,000 plus, right? Sometimes I call it just variable adjustment. I spoke about that yesterday. You still go to those filling stations. If you are buying 50 liters, I can bet it what you are paying for is not the 50 liters you bought. You probably get 45, 46 liters. So it's President Tinubu that's just changing you in that regard. So Nigerians also will need to be patriotic. There are things we need to do at our own level as responsible citizens.
And Prof, I think that goes back to the point.
If the minister is challenged,
right?
The minister will not be the one to. He's not the one in charge of TCN.
Okay,
he's not the one in charge of that component of electricity.
I kind of like the trend of this conversation.
We need to tax ourselves.
Right.
We need to tax ourselves. The leaders find their challenge. The followers too must try to do the right thing, please.
Right. So,
I'm talking from the
Prof, if I could just come in now quickly, Prof, just so that I can put this point in. I mean, you've made a valid point, but it goes back to what I was saying. If there are consequences for these actions, then they will not continue. A filling station that is selling below 1 liter or whose pump is not what it ought to be is under a regulator. So the regulator needs to go around and regulate. It's because there are no consequences. Pardon me, Prof. It's because
you spend 10 hours on a queue,
well, Prof,
and you are about to buy something. I'm sure you will not be bothered. You are bothered about having access, right? You see, these are things that we've documented. These things. These are national challenges. Even yesterday, somebody still complained that he was going to kind of bring courses on somebody. He said he bought it in a jerry can, 10 liters, paid for 10 liters. I barely got 7 liters. So, and he paid. I need to put my question in. These people have been put there to sanitize the sector. So it won't be as though you're trying to give an excuse to them to keep dropping the ball. From time to time, we see them going to filling stations saying that this one is not selling up to 1 liter. We're shutting it down. Why can't they do that across board? It's because these people know there will be no consequence. You have the commission, you have the authority, who are meant to actually ensure that there are consequences for these actions. But let me go to my question, Prof, because I know this is a national conversation, leadership and followership. And yes, indeed, the followership needs to sit up. But my question is this, Prof. For a lot of people, what they want is power. Yes, there's a responsibility attached to it. Paying your bills as when due, ensuring that you're not tapping electricity, as they say. There are those, responsibilities. But since we're at this point right now, and we need to ensure that at least everybody sits up. You've talked about followership, but I'll speak to the point around generation, transmission, and even distribution. Distribution, they said that we didn't have, liquidity. That's why we had to increase the price of the units. So we had the band A and all of that. So I imagine that there's more liquidity, right, which can be invested into infrastructure, which the transmission network is one of it, then goes to the GenCo. So when you talk about the funding, what more, or where can we get the extra funding? That's the question I'm trying to ask. Okay, the only way you can get extra funding, you see, to be honest with you, I've said several times in your studio that before privatization, we were doing 4,000 megawatts or 4,200 out. After more than a decade of privatization, effectively, we are still hovering around 4,005, 4,008 less. And we're still having those challenges we had before privatization. Federal government can no longer put money in the power sector because it's technically privatized. What government can provide is the enabling environment and strong knowledge-based sector regulation of governance to drive things. The war is going public, and the war relies on private sector to play in the energy space by way of foreign direct investment. We've seen trends of investment here and there, not significant, but as we progress as a country, I assume that we're going to have more because the space is there now. Once you have provided the enabling environment, private sector player will come. If the discos are not making enough money, I'm arguing, no serious-minded investor will come and join them in failures. A situation in which you have most of the discos technically insolvent will be a red sign or signal to would-be investors that, oh, if you take your money in there, you're going to be insolvent. So if the current players are doing well, they're smiling, of course, you see a natural reaction. The trend will be that other investors will also want to join them to make money, do business. And they're going to pay good salaries to Nigerians, and of course, the multiplier effect of which will be reflect positively on the national GDP. That's the way it goes. But government can no longer or should no longer fund electricity generation for distribution in Nigeria because that technically has been done. So government doesn't have that luxury of funds to put in this sector. We should free up the space and continue to encourage private sector to do it.
And you know, Professor Oke, something that you said earlier, you know, pretty much supports the view about the need for responsible leadership as well. You talked about the commitments of the discos, that they're, you know, they also have a challenge of inadequate funding. I'm not quoting you copiously now. Speaking of which, the BPE itself said that MDAs are owing distribution companies to the tune of 42 billion naira. States are also owing the discos as well. You know, so as much as there is the need for responsible followership, there is also the need for responsible leadership as well. But I'd like you to talk about, you know, the consequence of this constant grid collapses, because it's a critical national asset. This is about the 6th time that the country is experiencing it. Can we afford continuous grid collapses? That's on the one hand. And on the other hand, you've talked about funding. How much really would Nigeria require, you know, to explore other alternatives to power supply that will take us to an era of stability?
Let me answer the first question. I said in my introductory interaction that we've had about 60 to 65% decline in the frequency of grid collapses. That's to be applauded under this administration, because we are recording an average of 15 to 12. There was a year I came to your studios, I predicted 14. So when the 13th one happened around November, I went to December again, and 2 happened. So, but now in October, we passed 6. I won't say just 6, but it's a significant drop, meaning something is being done. And I will advocate 0 grid collapses. Maybe by next year we will have 3. I'm not sure we'll not have at least 1 more before the end of the year. Maybe next year we'll have like 5. Year after we'll have like 3. Subsequently we'll have 0 grid collapses. It means some things are being done somewhere. Fine. If it's funding, maybe the funds being deployed are being utilized to a reasonable extent because we can see the results under this administration. Then talking about funding, actually, is a tricky one. I would rather government concentrate its effort in the areas of sector governance and regulation and allow the sector to be self-sustaining in terms of investment. I even said it yesterday. There is a technical thing that needs to happen. If your environment is decent enough, if your project is banking, meaning an investor sits down, studies it, and says, oh, if I put my money in there, I will make my investment with profit. My investment, I will recoup the funds I'm investing, and I will make profit. They're going to come naturally. It's cheaper to even invest in Nigeria because with a few millions of dollars, right, you're going to make multi-billion naira investments. So government should continue to encourage private sector. And we are playing smart, just that it's taken us about 15 years to listen to some of our hardcore cases. If you started this decentralization thing, we will not be where we are today. And we'll take one step and take two backwards.
Right.
This decentralization started in 1999-2000 in Lagos. The federal government muzzled and couldn't work because of the Around Lagos thing. That's another politics. Just cast your mind back if it had worked then. By now, most states will be self-sufficient in electricity generation and distribution. But it's never too late. State government now should take steps. I thought you were going to ask me. It's almost a year now, a year plus since
that law.
Electricity. Yeah. What are states doing? Which states have attracted megawatts? Which states have attracted investment directly to their structure, both generation, transmission, and distribution? We need to be tracking those. Let's shift our focus away from the federal government for once. Let's ask questions about those states. States have responsibility to generate, transmit, and distribute both on-grid and on-grid under the new law. What are they doing?
And that's a very valid question, which we have raised time and again. But just like the local government judgment that was given, pardon me, Prof. Just like the local government judgment given by the Supreme Court, we've seen how states are carrying on as well. So clearly a lot of work needs to be done in that light. But we have to anchor at this point. I was going to ask you about the alternative that people are seeking now, that the price of gas is going up. Would you advise firewood? If not, what alternative do the people have? Because this is also your sector. It's like you're in the middle of everything: petrol, gas, electricity. So just on a final note, 30 seconds, what options are available to the people?
Okay. Let me tell you now. In another studio yesterday, I said Nigeria is about 12 or 13 cheapest. Nigeria has about 13 or 14 cheapest petroleum products globally. The world average is $1.78 to $1.80, $1.78 per liter of petrol. In Nigeria, it's still about 47 to 60 cents because of the strength of Naira. So we're not, is an international commodity. So to that extent, we just have to be efficient with our consumption pattern.
All right.
And increase investment and refining capacity. It's a question of demand and supply. We will then later see a downward trend in price increases. But Nigeria is still about the cheap in terms of petroleum products. But we should look for alternative anyway, like moving in groups and the rest, and yes, for household and office purposes.
All right, Prof, we have to anchor at this point. The question was about gas, cooking gas, right? But of course, petrol always takes the shot. But we're totally out of time, Prof. We're totally out of time. So this is what we'll do. We'll have another date with you. Clearly, there's a lot more we can get from this conversation. But we've been speaking with Professor of Energy and Electricity Law.
Please.
Professor Yemi, okay, I don't know what alternative these people have. They have to feed one way or the other, but we have to thank you so much, Professor Oke, Senior Advocate of Nigeria. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Have a good day.
Well, wish and hope it's a day that's filled with electricity. But we'll take a moment now, and when we return, we'll turn our attention to a video you may have seen, trended a few weeks ago, about, a certain doctor who returned to Nigeria to do his work. And a lot of people thought, wow, this is mind-blowing. We're speaking with Dr. Julius Oni in just a few seconds, so stay with us. We'll be right back.
And so it's time now to switch to the next leg of our conversation. And as we start off, really what you would usually hear is the 10 million naira plan to Japa, to leave Nigeria and off to greener pastures where you'll no longer be having to buy petrol for 1,000 naira plus per litre. And of course, as a result of that, maybe we should focus on the health sector specifically. 16,000 doctors have reportedly left Nigeria in the last 5 years alone. That's according to the Minister of Health, really. And, what we have left is about 55,000 licensed doctors practicing in Nigeria. So that's the trend. But we're moving away from the trend now to what we call reverse migration. And we're speaking to a Nigerian, a patriotic Nigerian who has returned home to help build the health sector. Let's welcome Dr. Julius Oni, who joins us on the program today. Hello, Doctor.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me.
It's good to finally meet you after that video that trended online in which you talked about your plans to return. And here you are. So how long have you been back?
I've been back for about 3 months.
And have you settled in?
Yeah, definitely. The kids are settling in. The wife is settling in. And certainly I am settling in. There's not been a shortage of work to do. So it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, good to hear that.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk much later on about how you're settling in with building your profession, which is why you're back home. But Doctor, give us a sense of what you left behind. And, I'm just going to put that in context. I was looking through your bio. You have a degree in biology from the State University of New York, Plattsburgh, graduated summa cum laude. You also earned fellowships from the University of Iowa's Department of Biochemistry. You obtained a medical degree between 2003 and 2007 from Howard University College of Medicine, and you were inducted into the Alpha and Omega Alpha Honor Medical Society. That's just a few of what I gathered about you. That's quite huge. So apart from the fact that you're a citizen, and you must have left some benefits behind. Give us a sense of what you left behind.
So actually, before I had come back to Nigeria, I had practiced for about 12 years in the U.S. So before I left, I was the fellowship director for joint replacement at Johns Hopkins. I was the diversity chair for the Department of Orthopedics at Johns Hopkins. And I was also, and I still remain, the director for global orthopedics at Johns Hopkins. Also, I currently chair the American Association of Hip and Knee Society Humanitarian Committee. So, and I also lead a multifamily real estate private equity firm. So I do a little bit of business too. Nice. Just don't wear the medicine hat alone. So, and I still do that quite a bit from here, even though I have fantastic partners who are kind of taking the lead for the most part now. But yeah, and I mean, a lot of these things were happening, and I was consulting also with a lot of industry stakeholders within medicine, and doing quite a bit of teaching and things of that nature in the U.S. But ultimately, the conviction got a little too strong, and I always knew I wanted to come home to share what I did with my fellow citizens in Nigeria. And I remembered actually having a first date with my now wife, and telling her that, asking her if she would come home with me, and if we were to get together, because this was the first date, we didn't know if we were going to end together then, but it's like, if we were to end together, would you mind living in Nigeria with me at some point in the future? And she did say yes. And to her credit, when the time came and the conviction got too strong, and I said, you know what, I feel like we need to go home, she didn't say no. So I give her all the credit for supporting my vision, and certainly allowing me to be here today.
So we have to especially thank her on behalf of the millions of Nigerians. Thank you so much. You didn't just say yes to marrying him. You said yes to returning home with him.
With him,
so
right?
Thank you. We're very grateful.
Thank you.
So I would like to hear more about your story. So there's your origin story, because you're like a superhero, right?
Far from it.
Like a super. And I'll explain to you why much later. So we'd like to know your story. What was your Japa story? Again, we have to use these terms because a lot of people can relate.
Absolutely.
So what was your Japa story? Why did you leave? And then you, of course, we know the great things you're doing, but let's rewind to maybe decades ago, you leaving, and then we'll push you further, but would like to know.
Thanks for asking that question. So I was born and raised in Ikare, Akoko, in Ondo State. My father is from Ileoluji, Ondo State, and my mother is from Ile-Ife, Osun State. So I'm a son of the soil through and through. Was born, in Ikare, went to school there, nursery school, primary school, and then secondary school in the Akoko region. Oh yeah, definitely. Antibisi nursery and primary school. That was where I went to. Absolutely. And for secondary school, I bounced around a bit. I went to a Unity, secondary school in Ekwime initially. Then went to Victory College in Ikare, and then eventually ended up in Citadel International College in Ikare Akoko, where I graduated. And then I was lucky to take the SATs. Did very well and got some partial scholarships to go to the U.S. And kudos to my parents; they really sacrificed quite a bit to make that possible for me. So once I got to the U.S., I was in 1999.
Just when Nigeria started the Fourth Republic.
You got it, absolutely. So it was a transitionary period for Nigeria, certainly, and a big transition for me because that was the first time I ever traveled by myself. I landed in the U.S. by myself. Didn't really know anyone's really within at least New York State where I landed. So, but I was lucky enough to stay focused despite some initial significant challenges. I adapted pretty quickly, started doing well academically, was lucky to get into medical school, and so went straight through into medical school at Howard University, and then was lucky to match into one of the prestigious orthopedic surgery residencies in the country, in the U.S. That's NYU Hospital for Joint Disease, and then went on to do my fellowship at one of the most prestigious fellowship programs too, at Rush University. But I actually wanted to do cardiovascular surgery when I first started medical school, but a conversation with my father about my grandmother's ailing knees changed that for me. So that conversation essentially started a cascade of events that led me to switching over to orthopedic surgery, and started that fire in me that, you know what, I wanted to contribute in significant ways to transforming the world of orthopedic surgery, the world of musculoskeletal care delivery in Nigeria. And about 5 years ago, I came up with a vision statement. And that vision statement was to contribute in one way or the other to the improvement of high-quality healthcare delivery, particularly musculoskeletal care, in underserved countries, starting with Nigeria. So once I made that decision, the question was now, what are the steps I needed to take to achieve that? And I figured out what those steps were, reverse engineer it. What do I need to be doing on a weekly basis, monthly basis, quarterly basis, yearly, to get to that step? And thankfully, I was able to achieve it.
I just wanted to ask, pardon me, Bukola, so what did that conviction feel like? It's important. I need you to explain it, because some people think it's just that feeling and you're like, yeah, I'm doing it. And everyone's like, are you okay? Are you mad? But what did it feel like for you? Was it a mix of fear and conviction, uncertainty, and hey, if this thing doesn't work, what did it feel for you? Can you describe it?
It was a lot of fear, a lot of doubt, a lot of questioning if I was making the right decisions. Because I was an associate professor. At that point, I was an assistant professor. When I made the decision, became an associate professor. I could have, just continued the trajectory, become a full professor, maybe take on some leadership in academia, become a chair of some programs eventually, do the usual, undulations of an academic doctor in the U.S. But I looked at that path, and it just didn't excite me, to be frank with you. And I looked at, if I put the same unit of work into Nigeria, I would make such a bigger difference in the lives of so many more people. either through some of the training program that I've started, the fellowship, we could talk about that later, either through direct service delivery to patients, either through some of the education that I can facilitate, either through becoming the bridge between the US and Nigeria with regards to being able to create some exchange programs where we can have Nigerians going to train in the US and U.S. folks coming to train and learn in Nigeria also. So that just seemed like a more exciting opportunity for me. And so, you know, and what really did it for me eventually was I said, if I turned 80, if I was lucky enough to be 80, and I was reflecting over life, which decision would I regret more? Not trying, or trying and failing, even if I did fail. And it was very clear to me that I wanted to definitely try. The only failure was going to be not to try at all. And so once I felt that clarity of vision, despite the fear, despite the doubt, I went to my wife, who was my co-decision maker, and said, listen, I've been tortured by this decision for a while, and I feel like I gotta do it. And she was gracious enough to say, you know what, you did mention this to me 11 years ago, and I noticed how I tortured you. You know, we've talked a little bit about it, and I noticed how tortured you've been more recently about it. So I'll support you. And we were living in our dream home at that point. We kind of, you know, were fairly comfortable. And, you know, so we had some conversations about putting things in place to make sure that at least the bases were covered and that the family was still going to be in a on good financial footing, because you don't want to be stupid and and not do that. And once we knew that, you know what, we will be comfortable, we don't have to be the most, live the most luxurious life, but we could be comfortable and we can pursue our dreams even from Nigeria. Then the decision was clear.
You know, it's quite inspiring listening to you speak, and it's an 11-year-old decision from what you have said. And there's a lot of altruism in, you know, the motivation for your decision. But just before I go on to my other question, coming back home now, do you feel a need to rethink? And it's important. This question is important because things are not getting better. Petrol is 1,200 naira, and your field, which is the health sector, is particularly challenged right now.
Yeah, actually, that's a great question. More than ever, I'm very convinced that I made the right decision. Seeing patients, you know, come into the office now weeks later after their surgeries and walking without assistive devices, walking without canes, without walkers, without the wheelchair, you know, and just being excited that they're getting a new lease on life gives me so much joy. I can't, no amount of money can replace that. And to be able to do it in the place that I was born and raised, to be able to offer that services to people who look like my father, my mother, my uncles, my aunties, to be able to do it in a place that I feel such a close affinity to, just gives me so much joy. And yes, the macroeconomics of the country is tough right now, but one thing I know for sure is that this is not going to be permanent. Like Nigerians like to say, no condition is permanent, right? So even though it's tough, in this types of situation, I see great opportunity to set, you know, things in place to be able to take advantage of the growth that is sure to come in Nigeria. I have no doubt that there will be a transitional period, but then there will be growth at the end of that. And if you are focused on the problems, and it's easy to do that because there are a lot of problems to focus on, then it's going to be very difficult to see the opportunities. I'm And I just choose to focus on the positives, focus on the opportunities. Yes, I've faced my share of challenges, no questions about it. But I knew what I was getting myself into. And, you know, just like this, you know, Lagos is going to Lagos sometimes, but we move.
You're a true Nigerian. Thank you for that injection of hope. I'm glad that it's not a physical injection anyway. So, Doc, talk to us about your particular field, which is an interesting one in Nigeria. You know, there is a popular belief out there that if you don't go to the traditional bone setters, you're just wasting your time. Yeah. And the only other one, you know, that has a reputation for doing bone setting well, you know, the institution here in Lagos, there is also a particular perception about that institution as well. So you're coming with a lot of hope and a lot of professionalism. What would you like to tell those who are requiring that kind of health intervention about the difference that you are bringing?
Yeah, thank you for that question. I think what we see in the way that people see musculoskeletal health in Nigeria is just reflective of the resources that are available. So think about it. In Nigeria right now, there are about maybe 400 or so orthopedic surgeons to treat 200 or so million people. In the US, there's about 300 and something million people. Yeah. There's about 30,000 or more orthopedic surgeons.
Ouch.
So just think about that. So that's why, I mean, even if those 400 or so orthopedic surgeons wanted to work super hard, they cannot sufficiently treat everybody in the country. So that work of doing the vast majority of musculoskeletal care, particularly fracture care, falls onto the traditional bone setters. And there's no question, and I've looked into this research, that traditional bone setters have a higher complication rate. No questions about that. Because for the most part, they are unregulated. For the most part, they have a variety, a significant variance in the quality of service that they deliver. You know, there's pictures and pictures of people, you know, being, treated with wood and pretty tight, splints or casts that eventually lead to gangrene. That's death of the extremity, and eventually leads to amputation. But guess who does the amputation? It's going to have to be the doctor. So when these people get these complications, to send them to the hospital.
They have success rates, but it's not standardized and regulated.
You got it. So yeah. So let's even say the success rate is 60%, right? But they go into the master marketers, so they go into focus on the ones that are successful, right? And the ones that are not successful end up going to the hospital, and then the orthopedic surgeons have to take care of them, right? So the orthopedic surgeons then get the reputation of being people doing the amputations, and so it's a very complex environment, and I do believe the solutions involves every stakeholder, effort. Right? Maybe, the traditional bone setters organizing, and I think they have some organizations in trying to standardize some of their practices. Maybe they combine forces with orthopedic surgeons so that we can all come together with some basis for what is acceptable to immobilize patients, right? We can then say, okay, for these patients with no open fractures, with closed fractures, lung bone fractures, this is some of the splints that we can use for that. If they have open fractures, if they have more complex stuff, just send it to the orthopedic surgeons so that they could be the front line like they are currently, but they could at least have some more standard, and we could find ways to provide even more resources to support them. So I'm not one to just badmouth traditional bone setters. I think they have a role to play. I just think that we need to figure out ways to work together so it's not
And you're offering opportunities for that kind of collaboration through your fellowship, right?
So actually, my fellowship is focused mainly on training joint replacement surgeons. And we have one surgeon working with me currently to learn the techniques that I perform.
Is it a lady that I've seen on your Instagram?
What did you say?
Is it a lady?
No, it's actually a gentleman.
So I've seen some pictures on your Instagram of your team, but please go ahead.
Yeah, it's a gentleman, absolutely, who is working with me right now, and we are doing the surgeries together. I'm showing him some of the ropes around it, and my goal is that by the end of the year, that he's great at doing joint replacements also of the hips and the knees.
Fantastic. Lots of questions. You should see our questions. So let's try and pick and choose. Clearly, we still have a bigger conversation with you. We're still having you on our program, Amazing Nigerian. So watch out for that. It's a big one where we capture the work he does on a daily basis and other things that you probably want to hear.
Right?
Interview as Amazing Africans are coming next week. But I'd like you to speak to two things, right? First, how many years have you been in service? A lot of people want to know. So what kind of services do you offer? How frequent do you offer it? What kind of patients? I'm trying to limit my questions. What kind of patients do you see? What's your average day like? How many surgeries have you conducted? I'll stop
that's
now.
about 6 questions.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. So I've been in practice for 12 years. I graduated from orthopedic surgery residency in 2012 and did an extra year of fellowship. But by then, I was already an orthopedic surgeon. I was just also in additional training to become a master at doing joint replacements. My subspecialty of orthopedic surgery, and oh, by the way, orthopedic surgery is the surgery of muscles, bones, and joints.
Right.
My subspecialty is hips and knees. So I replace people's hips and knees when they've degenerated. So when you see a lot of people complaining of, hip pain or knee pain, and at some point they're not able to walk well anymore, or their quality of life is severely affected, that is what I do. I replace those joints and give people back their quality of life and alleviate their pain. And there are so many ways that we can achieve this, and there's more and more of the surgeries being done in Nigeria right now, but there's also different ways that we can approach it, different techniques that we can also bring to bear. So that is my focus. Over the 12 years, I've done over 4,000 surgeries between hips and knees.
How many have you done in Nigeria so far?
In Nigeria, actually, I've been coming to Nigeria for about 10 years or so,
Smart.
In and out. So I've been coming about 1 to 4 times a year doing surgery. So in some years, I was doing up to 30 surgeries a year in Nigeria, even. And so in Nigeria, in total, I probably have done hundreds of surgeries.
So many other questions, but we must anchor.
30 seconds. There are Nigerians who reach out and say, well, all roads lead back home for me, but I don't know how to do it. I'm worried about security, this and that. Yes, those concerns are legit, but this is you right here. How many months in Lagos?
3 months in Lagos.
What do you want to tell them? I have a young lady who reached out and said, I'm definitely coming back home, but I don't know how to.
Yes. So I consider that one of my responsibilities to figure out a path for the people that are interested. Actually, over 100 doctors reached out to me, and even more other healthcare professionals, physical therapists, nurses reached out and said, you know what, I'm interested in this too. There's a fire burning in the hearts of these people to come home to Nigeria and transform it. This is the way we're going to transform the healthcare system in this country, is working closely with the diaspora and healthcare professionals, working closely with the wonderful, ingenious local professionals that we have, hand in hand, and working together to transform but it's going to be tough to answer that in 20 seconds, but I am more than happy to come back at some point and really outline what I think is necessary. But it's important to cover your bases. You certainly just don't want to come in blindly. You want to make sure that you are thoughtful about it, that you make sure that you're going to be financially relatively stable, at least be prepped for that, so that even if no income comes in for a significant amount of time, you are still in a place where you can be comfortable and plan from a place of comfort, because without that, then you will be forced to cut corners, and that's not what you want to do when you come here.
And that's a lot of wisdom, and it's such an eye-opener to know that there are Nigerian medical practitioners over there who want to come home, and we could also ask you about those who want to leave and can't wait to leave. But we have to anchor at this point
for now.
And thank you so much, Dr. Julius Oni.
And if they want to leave, let them leave, let them get the skills, and then come back. No worries. Absolutely.
All right, Dr. Julius Oni, CEO, Doc Medical Center Nigeria, Director for Global Orthopedics at St. Johns Hopkins. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
And we're very proud to be
you.
associated with you, to have you on the show.
Thank you so much.
And so from here, we'll take a break. When we return, we'll turn our attention back to sports. That situation yesterday with the Super Eagles hopefully has been resolved, but what are the consequences and what's going to happen going forward? We'll talk about that after this break. Join us again.
We were really maltreated, and there was nobody from the area that came to receive us. Nobody. Security. In fact, it was when I saw that the situation was unbearable, we made arrangement to hire our own vehicles. We hired our own vehicles. They did not allow us to go out and join our vehicles.
There is no gainsaying the fact that we need to respect, our national teams. Our national teams carry, the national flag of our countries, our various countries. If you look at particularly the Nigerian national team, the crop of players that we have to go through, make a lot of sacrifices to represent our country and to play for it. So we must be interested in their circumstances and in their situation at every point in time.
Oh, yes, let's talk about our own Super Eagles. Well, like Dr. Julius Oni, they returned to Nigeria, but the circumstances are definitely different. They didn't go through anything good in Libya, but they're back home. Cecilia Morgwe joins us yet again. Cecilia, second time we're seeing you in as many days, so obviously there are real issues to be discussed here. But first, the return of the Super Eagles. Yeah. I'm sure you're excited for them.
Yeah, after 20 hours. When we started, we thought it wasn't hostage. It was just the usual tactics they do.
Yeah.
But until we started seeing pictures of where they were actually kept, that was hostage, or you can even use the word kidnapping. I didn't want to use those words yesterday. We're trying to be careful because we couldn't reach the players or the delegation that were with them because they didn't have access to the internet or anything. I was chatting with one of them and they said the deputy governor of Edo State had to go meet the security man, one of the security personnel there, and then connect Truth Ekong's phone to Wi-Fi. That's how they started reaching out to the outside world. Until then, another Nigerian, a good Samaritan, also had to bring a Wi-Fi for them because that wasn't enough because it was only Truth that could reach out. Then all of them started, if you check the pictures currently on, you see that that's how they were struggling to connect to Wi-Fi. And these are players, these are big boys. These are national team players are struggling to actually get access to internet. This was after after 14 hours or thereabouts, because they spent about 20 hours, in total in Libya. And if you look at the back, check the back, that's where this is the airport that is hardly being used. So the airport usually is used for Hajj, when the other airports are filled up. And Libya is ruled by two presidents. You have the president of Benghazi, president of Tripoli. So at the end of the day, they were kept in a very small place, and they have just the only people they could see were just security men. There was no other plane that landed on the airport on that day. So it's as if it was like a hijack. They were supposed to land in Benghazi. They told them an hour before they landed, they told them to reroute. Plane was diverted to this particular airport. So you're wondering what's going on. I can't imagine what they were going through at that time, because you're thinking you're going to land here, and the next thing they take you here, and you get to the airport, it's empty. The only people that received you were actually security personnel, not the federation, not the Libyan Football Federation you were expecting, because that's the norm, that's the practice. When you arrive at a country, you're coming to play football. The federation, the football federation, the governing body of that country will receive you. That's how it's done. So, players struggling to actually connect to the internet. And then the video of them singing and dancing, happy, home, my home, singing because this was when they were freed after 20 hours. You know, they want to go home. So you see pictures like this, you see parliamentarians, you know, you see NFF executive members, not just the players, like everybody kept in
Even
one
Deputy
place.
Governor
You know?
of
Even of Edo State, he was part of the delegation. You just see all of them, I mean, happy, joyful that they are finally going home. I mean, you went there to play football and not this.
Let's take a listen. Let's take a listen first to what the atmosphere was like, and then we'll come back.
And then we'll come back. Okay. I'm sorry for that. Okay? I'm sorry for that. National team. They've gone through discomfort for 24 hours. You know, and they're still putting up a very good attitude in spite of it all. Yeah. Now, Cecilia, I don't know about you. Yeah. What we saw yesterday and the explanation provided by the Libyan government doesn't add up. Does it add up for you?
It doesn't, because they say usually have a routine check, like it happens like that. Sometimes you can't land in a particular airport. They tell you to land in somewhere else. But hey, yes, we get that. It happens, right? Now, how do you keep people for 20 hours in a place? I mean, if you see pictures of the airport, it's a small airport. Like, it's a small airport that is hardly in use. And they didn't even have, when I was chatting with some of them last night, they didn't even have facilities where you can even land. It was even hard because they were not prepared for the arrival of that particular aircraft. So it was even hard. And this is the airport that, you know, where they were kept. And at the end of the day, according to some of the players, the Abrak International Airport, the VIP lounge where they were kept is like the VIP lounge if you've been to Benin City Airport, you know how small it is. That's where they were all kept. I mean, these are national team players. I mean, just you wonder, you can't see, they didn't see anybody. No, they didn't see a normal person. I mean, a civilian, so to speak. The personnel they were seeing were all security personnel. I mean, the ones who rejected, not really rejected, who kept the plane from, in the food aspect was the funniest one. See, empty airport, no one there. The food aspect was even the funniest one. Those who didn't eat their meal while they were, you know, inside the plane. You know, sometimes they just give you a pack, you keep it. That was what they had to fall back on because they were very hungry.
So they didn't provide meals for them as well?
No food, no water, no Wi-Fi, nothing. It's as if their phone were jammed, so they couldn't even connect to the outside world. And it was, I think they said one, a guy who had bread, I mean, carried bread along, was one that now brought bread, eating bread and water. When the Nigerian who brought Wi-Fi for them, when they brought water, that was when they were now eating bread and water.
Thankfully, I mean, they're back home now. This is
eventually
the team landing last night about 9 p.m. Last night. So they're back home. Now, the big question is first, what will be done in terms of reparation for these team members? These are our star boys.
Yes.
You know, by the way, you should see how we treat them in our dress celebrities and stuff. So reparation, and then the match that is expected to be played later tonight, at least according to the schedule. Which obviously the Super Eagles will not be a part of.
Happening, yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. So the onus is on CAF now to do the needful. But of course, they would investigate and not to preempt whatever CAF will do. But I think some of the evidence we have, it points to, I mean, what is playing out, the shenanigans that has been described. So speak to us about what will happen in the coming hours, what you expect to happen, and when we are likely to get a definitive pronouncement from CAF.
Yeah, when it comes to CAF, it's actually difficult to predict. FIFA, you can say, okay, this is what has been stipulated. But CAF is hard. They've already refer the incident to a disciplinary committee. I'm like, you've seen videos, you've seen pictures. This is not hearsay. This is not, I think, this is not assumption. This is what really happened. 20 hours. What are you going to do? Why are you waiting? Why are you referring the case to a disciplinary committee? If you want to take action, it should be immediate. I was thinking the game should have been postponed by, let's say, another 24 hours and the players stay. But it's hard. International break doesn't really have that window because very short, and players will have to go back, to their clubs. But I think that just maybe after the whole. Maybe after, I don't know, maybe before the Nations Cup, they can decide to find a window to actually play this game. Or Libya should be sanctioned for this because we've established the fact that this is not the first time. It's just because this is Super Eagles and it's a national team and it becomes an international event. And that's why CAF is even responding. Enyimba have suffered the same fate. Rivers United have suffered the same fate. Nigerian clubs.
In Libya?
In Libya, yes. Nigerian clubs have suffered the same fate when they travel internationally. Like the hostility that the North Africans usually give to, Nigeria. I don't know if it's, I don't even know how to kind of classify it. It's like there's just this hostility that they have, when they are receiving teams. I think usually we just say it's a mind game, try to play mind game, keep them, they won't have that condition to actually play very well, kind of, that comfort or anything. But this was just, overboard. This was just too much.
And, President Bola Tinubu has rightly, demanded that an investigation be made. And I wonder what rules they'll be invoking from, the CAF rules and regulations to address this, Cecilia.
Yeah, that's what we're just waiting for, because they've never really sanctioned. This hasn't happened before. We've seen maybe 6 hours or something like that. But this national team, there's no national team that have gone through this. In the history of, CAF. We haven't seen this, how bad this is. So we really don't know what I think, maybe they can just be sanctioned, that they can play outside their home ground if they cannot receive their visitors well.
But something needs to be done to ensure it doesn't happen again.
Precisely.
Because other countries will just say, oh, this is a game plan. You need 20 hours, we'll give you 2 days. So we'll delay you for 2 days. As you said, CAF put out that tweet that it views the disturbing and unacceptable experiences of the Nigerian football team at an airport in Libya in a very serious light. So at least I like the tone of that tweet from CAF, saying that this is unacceptable and we are viewing it in a serious light. So we'll see what they will do. But Sisi, yet again, you don't look like what the Super Eagles have been through. you don't look like what they've been through.
Kade, even at the club level, we shouldn't be seeing this kind of treatment, for our clubs.
That's why
countries
who act like this should play outside their home ground. It's simple.
Simple as that.
If you can't receive your guests well, then you have to, because this is football. This is not politics. It's not.
Sisi, we have to thank you so much yet again. I love the passion. Right, I love that, and that's, I think I must commend Nigerians for coming through for the Super Eagles. Cecilia Morgbe, our sports correspondent. Maybe you'll have gone to Libya with them, Sisi. Thank you so much.
20 hours, I don't know if I can survive that. And good thing, there was no woman among them. I was actually happy.
Whatever happened to equality now? Equal representation.
Sisi, we can survive it.
Yeah, we can.
Even more.
We can. I would have made more noise,
There you go. Sisi, thank you so much for joining us. Look forward to speaking with you again on better issues.
Yes. On a pleasant note. Precisely. Maybe when the Super Eagles win.
And in November, we're waiting for that.
There you go.
2 games.
So we have to anchor at this point. What a show it has been. If you had goosebumps during that conversation with Dr. Julius Oni, absolutely. That was a mind-blowing conversation, and I do hope that this ripple effect causes even greater things to happen in our nation. But we have to leave right now. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Kayode Okikiolu.
And I hope that sense of patriotism percolates, through followership and leadership as well, so that we can have a better Nigeria in the short rather than long term. Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back again tomorrow. I am Bukola Koka.
And Sunrise Daily is next.